Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. You're watching Daddy Daughter Talk the podcast, and I am Kelsey, and you are
Chris, Dad.
What we talking about?
Well, we were talking previously about ownership, and we were specifically talking to our Black brothers and sisters. So that conversation was kind of more specific just within the community, which that conversation could go a myriad of ways. But where I want to take the conversation now is to America. It's time that we have a come to Jesus conversation with America, with everything that's going on nowadays and talking about ownership. I think it's only appropriate that we have a conversation with America about ownership. Because in every relationship, you have to just come clean with what you've done. And that's the only way that the healing and moving forward can take place. If everybody's denying everything that's happened, there's no way, shape, form possible that we can move forward. So with that being said, let's have this come to Jesus talk with America. And I have no problem with starting it. So we have a bunch of demonstrations going on across this country right now. America is just, they call it the boiling pot. Well, the pot is boiling over. The pot is definitely boiling over. And let's go back to because basically what we're talking about nowadays is police brutality. Talking about police brutality and the mistreatment of a certain segment of the country, which we're talking about minorities, we're talking about Black and brown people that are being mistreated by the police officers. And when we try to have these conversations, we then have things thrown up like Chicago, Black on Black crime, things along those lines, which are tools of deflection. Let's talk about some ownership. That's the only way we can move forward if we really seriously have a conversation about ownership. And one thing that's never been owned is slavery. Slavery has not ever really truly been called what slavery was. Slavery was a fast track to the economic growth of this country. This country would not be what this country is economically. It never would have been what it was economically had it not been for slavery. And let me go ahead and define slavery for anybody out there that is some way, shape, form, or fashion confused about what slavery was. Slavery was free labor. Absolute free labor. So if you can run a business without any payroll, that's a huge overhead that you can avoid. And that's what slavery was. It was employment without pay. And America does not want to address that issue as far as reparations. But even after slavery was abolished with the 13th Amendment, there was also a caveat in the 13th Amendment that said slavery is abolished with the exception of imprisonment. So after slaves were freed, you wrote up a whole bunch of laws to figure out a way to imprison them. So if you imprison them, that's still free labor. And that is another ugly scar that America does not want to admit to. America does not want to have that conversation. They don't want to have the conversation about Jim Crow. They don't want to have the conversation about redlining. They don't want to have a conversation about systematic racism because it is ugly. It's painful. But America will never, ever, ever be what America supposedly thinks that it's supposed to be without having this conversation.
One thing that we're missing as well that America doesn't want to talk about is the reason that the police exist, how they started, what the police were designed to do in its originality.
You're not talking about slave catchers, are you?
Right, which is to catch runaway slaves. And if people, I'm not gonna say they, if people want to understand why we're so upset, why we are demanding respect, we are demanding that we are treated as equals, and that we're at very minimally treated as human beings, because minorities, Black people and brown people are treated worse than animals. If you want to begin to understand where that frustration comes from, you have to take ownership in what's been done. Identify. Go ahead.
No, you said identify. But before we even get to that point, I asked the Black woman, why are you angry? First thing I need to do is shut the hell up and listen to what it is that she has to say. So when you ask Black people why they are upset, why are you guys protesting? Why are you kneeling? Don't ask the question if you're not willing to listen. And not listen to respond, because Chicago, Black on Black crime, that is a response. That's all it is. It's a counter response to the question that you asked, which means you're not listening to me. You're only listening to respond. You're not listening to comprehend. And if you're listening to respond, we aren't communicating. We're arguing. Don't have any desire to argue. If that's what you want to do, argue, move over to that side of town and wait for me, because I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. But if you want to have an intelligent conversation and learn something, because that's what you're going to do in this conversation, America, you are going to learn. We already know. You're going to learn. If you don't open your mind up, open your ears up, and shut everything else down to accept what it is that we have to say, you won't learn a damn thing. And you, as the oppressor, you do not have the right to tell me as the oppressed what oppression is. That's the same as walking up to a rape victim to define rape to her.
I think a lot of it comes from, like you said, the anticipation and the waiting to rebuttal. Well, let me refute those rebuttals right now. Black on Black crimes, we still get penalized for them. If I go out and kill a Black man, if I go out and kill a Black woman right now, I bet the bottom dollar I'm going to jail, and I bet the bottom dollar I'm going to get way more time than a white person who kills a white person would ever get. I'm not going to get that slap on the wrist. So let's throw that out of there, because if we're talking about justice and your response to that is, well, Black people kill Black people all the time. Black people go to jail for that. Meanwhile, officer blah, blah, blah is comfortably walking through the store buying milk as if he didn't just kill a man. Okay, so next, you talk about the police force and how when we say disband the police, and I'm sorry, not disband the police, defund the police. You say, well, the police are there to serve and protect. The police originated because they were there to catch runaway slaves. And then even in 2019, I don't see no serving or protecting, because the badge is Trump. Trumps the fact that there's a human behind that badge. The blue trumps the fact that there's a human behind that badge. And humans are capable of making mistakes, capable of having bad days. And those bad days are justifiable for murdering somebody. So don't want to hear that anymore. Well, you have the right to vote now, or you guys have the same equal opportunities as the next person. Not when redlining still exists, not when I can live on this side of the street and that makes me not qualified to go to this school that has more resources, that has more opportunities than the school that I'm shipped to, that may even be way farther from where I live, just because that line is there. That imaginary line segregates me and doesn't allow me the opportunities and the resources that the next person has. So while this conversation is something that we're always trying to have, but these rebuttals come, educate yourself first before you start to throw it out there. You don't know what you're talking about. You're comparing apples to oranges. This is not what we're talking about. It's not the same conversation, and we can never have this conversation if every time we go into it, you already fighting back. You're not hearing me. You're not hearing me at all. So let's kill that, and because as long as you can rebuttal, I can refute. You know. But how about we just have a conversation and one, find out our why. Why do we feel this way? And we can tell you because we got the receipts all day. And then two, figuring out what you can do to take ownership in the part that you play. Okay, I would much rather somebody say, you know what, you taught me something today. From here on out, I'm going to do better than to sit back and try to defend the damage that you've caused. That don't even make sense to me.
Okay. Another one of those famous refutes or rebuttals is, I never owned any slaves. My family has never owned any slaves. First off, how do you know? How do you know your family never owned any slaves? Because they probably never told you if you did. But let's go with the whole concept that nobody ever in your family owned any slaves. I'm a military veteran. And shout out to all the vets out there. If you can take a young man that's 18, 19, 20 years old and throw him in a war zone for 1 year, 6 months for that matter, and it is absolute chaos going on around this young man for 6 months, and he be dubbed or diagnosed with PTSD for the remainder of his life. What you're saying is what happened to him over there can impact his today. What happened to him yesterday can impact his today for the rest of his tomorrows. All those things that happened back then, because we can go back and look at it, because it's written down that you had slavery and then you don't have slavery. Like, it happened like that. You had slavery and then you didn't have slavery. So when we stopped having slavery, did we then the next day become educated? Did we become financially literate? Hell, did we become landowners? Did we become full-fledged citizens of this country? Exactly. So what happened? What happened to all those people that were released from slavery? Those that didn't run north became sharecroppers, which was another form of slavery.
Indentured slavery.
Right, indentured servitude. Let's call that indentured servitude. But we weren't able to own land. Mm-hmm. So at any point in time, somebody could come take that away from us. We couldn't join unions, so we didn't have the support of other people, which was real stupid for unions, because a union is only as strong as its members, its number of members. So you turn down solidarity to belong to something that you probably will never belong to anyway. And then we just got locked up for loitering at train stations because you start seeing that people would jump on trains to take off north. So you started to criminalize every single thing that we could do just to get us in jail to get that free labor. And then once you get us in jail for felonies, then we can't get jobs, we can't vote. So what are we to do? We are to survive any way, shape, form, or fashion that we find to survive, because nobody's going to sit there and just die. Nobody, no man, not here, is just going to sit there and starve to death. It's just not going to happen. But those are contributing factors that if my grandfather didn't have a house and my dad didn't have a house, then what's the likelihood of me having a house? It's a generational thing that trickles down and trickles down and trickles down and trickles down and trickles down. I'm a firm believer that Black kids, you cannot tell a Black kid that they can be anything in this world that they want to be. You have to show them. And you talked about earlier about, well, you can vote. Okay, well, show me in the Constitution where white men were allowed to vote. Not necessarily in the Constitution, because that was innately given to them. Because it was in the Constitution that we were able to vote. And that was in 1964, if I'm not mistaken. So when my mother was born, she didn't have the right to vote. It's 1964. That is 50 some odd years ago. For 50 some odd years, Black people have had the right to vote. I mean, like, really just think about that. Now, you have the right to vote, but you still have to educate yourself on how to vote. And outside of educating yourself on how to vote, you had voter fraud, giving people difficulty at the polling stations. So just because you have a right to doesn't mean you necessarily have the ability to. And let me share a quick story. Again, let me share a quick story, and this is just my life. In the 5th grade, starting in the 5th grade, I was in the Normandy School District in St. Louis. And for the sake of this argument, from a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being outstanding, I would say the school that I went to, Bell Nor, was, let's say, about a 7. Class sizes to teacher to student ratio was a pretty decent ratio. All of our lunches were good. Textbooks weren't the best textbooks, but every child had one. And for the most part, they were relatively free of writing from the previous year. So the textbooks were in pretty decent condition. I say the textbooks were probably out of 1 to 10. Textbooks were probably strong 7.5 to 8. So we had pretty good textbooks. So school was always clean, had all facilities, all worked, bathrooms worked, power worked. We didn't have to worry about the AC being off or the heat being off in the wintertime. So for whatever reason, which is a whole different conversation, I ended up having to go to a city school at the end of that school year. Now, the city school that I went to was Farragut, because we had moved. So we ended up having to go to a school in our district. Again, using the scale of 1 to 10, Farragut was a 1. Not every student had textbooks. Not every textbook had all the pages. We had way more students than teachers. And then going to lunch was a crap shot. You better check that milk real good before you decide to consume it, because half the time the milk was spoiled. It's clumped up. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. So I go from a 7 to a 1. And in that very short period of time that I was in that school, we took a field trip to Ladue. The Ladue school that we went to was a solid 10. I'm in the 5th grade. So this is, let's say 84. In each classroom in Ladue, it was no more than 10 students per class. In Normandy, let's say 15 students per teacher. Ladue, 8 to 10 students per teacher. Farragut, 25 students per teacher. So you can then begin to see who has the attention. We talked about the textbooks in Normandy. We talked about the textbooks in Farragut. The textbooks in Ladue, every student had a brand new textbook every year. Each class had a class pet, whether it be a fish, a gerbil, rabbit. Each class had a class pet. The gym had carpet in it. The gym had a carpet in it. And every single classroom had a computer. This is 1984. Every single classroom had a computer. And this was all in 1 year. I'm still in the 5th grade. I seen a class that was a 7. Well, I was in a class that was a 7. I was in a class that was a 1, and I visited a class that was a 10. So I went from 1 to 10 and somewhere in the middle, all in 1 year. In that 1 year, education really kicked in for me. Here I am, 10 years old, and I see the different levels of opportunity. Because when I went to Farragut, Miss Fisher told me, never heard this before in my life, never heard it since. She told the class, because I was only in their school for approximately 5 weeks. She told the class, my first day there, I don't know why she chose that day to say it, but she said it. She said, I don't care what you do, you will not be my problem next year. You're going on to the 6th grade. If you don't do your work, you're going on to the 6th grade. If you don't come to class, you're going on to the 6th grade. So where's the motivation for the child to do what it is they're supposed to do? As a matter of fact, right now, Farragut ain't open. If you go through St. Louis, all of the schools that were open when I was a kid, the majority of them are closed. But what do you do with the kids? You either bust them out to the county, or you collectivize the schools. So it used to be this many high schools. Now it's only this many high schools, but you still got these many kids. So you cram them into a few schools. The resources still aren't there. Not at all. But these are public schools. That means they're funded by the public, taxpayers, things along those lines. You graduated from the same school that I graduated from. What you think Lafayette would be on a scale of 1 to 10? 10. Lafayette has been voted several times over the years the best public high school in Missouri. Not just St. Louis, in Missouri. And both of us going to that school gave us an advantage over everybody else that we knew. Everybody else in our family, or everybody else in the hood, depending on where you were living at the time. But I still lived in the hood, even though I went to school out to Lafayette. And that gave me an advantage. Textbooks fresh. You got the proper student to teacher ratio. You never had to worry about a school lunch. Them school lunches gonna be hot, fresh, and healthy. But that let me know that the young man that lived next door to me didn't have the same opportunity that I had. He didn't get the same education that I went. Even though we were in the same grade, we weren't getting the same education at all. And it's not fair. But America thinks that I was born with the same opportunity, that my white counterpart was. Not at all. But at some point in time, we have to sit back and have that conversation on why the opportunity ain't the same. Somebody got to take ownership for this shit. Somebody has to take ownership for it. And after we take that ownership, then and only then can we move forward.
And I think just to kind of circle it back and to make the picture crystal clear for all those watching, the original statement was, well, my family never owned any slaves. But even if that's true or not true, regardless, you still benefit from the fact that there was slavery. I never was a slave, but I still get the consequences of the fact that there was slavery. My very first year voting, 18 years old, at Arizona State University, I did not get to vote. I didn't get to vote. I filled out the absentee ballot. Every time them annoying people on campus was like, have you registered to vote? Have you registered to vote? I registered to vote more than 10 times because they kept asking me. And I'm like, all right, it can't hurt. It can't hurt. I never received it. They sent my absentee ballot to my home address, and I don't even give them the home address. I gave them the school dorm address. I could not vote. I didn't get the opportunity, even though I went through the steps to do so. Okay.
Question before you, whoa, I gotta pause and ask a question. Mm-hmm. Is there a question on the application indicative of what race you are? Mm-hmm. So if it were sent to the wrong address, is it a possibility that it was sent to the wrong address on purpose?
It could be. I'm not gonna say it was or it wasn't because I don't know, but it could be.
Okay, continue.
On the application, I think that it's very important to know, especially given where I'm at. I'm in Arizona, a very much so red state. On the application, it asks you, are you a Democrat, are you a Republican, or are you indifferent? Being that I had no concepts of really voting or just politics in general, I'm Black. They teach you that we Democrats. They don't matter who on the paper, what growing up or what we know, if we don't know about politics, is you just a Democrat. We don't vote red. It don't matter who on this side, we don't vote red, which that's a problem within itself. But the lack of education, I'm not Democrat every single time. I don't know better.
That's true. But we also have to go into how and why you feel the way you feel. All of these things are learned. They're learned behaviors. Racism is a learned behavior. But if it's learned, who taught?
Right. And before we even get into that, I just want to finish it just to make sure that you get it. So we talked about you say around 1984 in 5th grade. Well, I've also had the pleasure of going through St. Louis's education system. I've been to Normandy School District. I've been to Ferguson-Florissant School District, Hazelwood School District, Rockwood School District. There was one more. Highland, West School District, Riverview. Mm-hmm. So that's 5 school districts, 5 totally different experiences. Well, I guess Riverview and Normandy in the early 2000, I would say 2004, 2003, 4, 5-ish. That basically the same thing. But starting there, because Riverview and Normandy were the first 2 school districts that I went to, and being in kindergarten, 1st grade, I'm like, kind of cool here. I mean, we had everything that we needed, and I'm in 1st grade kindergarten. I didn't really have textbooks like that, so I didn't really get to see that aspect of school. And then going into Ferguson-Florissant School District, where I spent the most time, at that school, the differences that I noticed between those schools is that everybody had lockers and everybody had a bathroom, and there was a bathroom between 2 rooms. So everybody had access to a bathroom right there in between in their classrooms. They didn't have to walk down the halls and, go far to a restroom in that elementary school that I went to. And then fast forward, we go to Hazelwood School District. Seemingly, like, I thought this was the basis of school. Everybody had their own lockers. We were able to switch between classes. We had resources. We had books. We had solid lunch for as far as I knew. And then I got to high school, still in Hazelwood School District. It's a lot of us. It's a lot of us in this one school. And we had the Common Core things, and then we had a few different electives. But to me, again, that's normal. I thought that was school. Everybody across the board, this is what it looks like. This is high school. But then I moved to Rockwood, and I was like, oh, whoa, what is this? So coming from Hazelwood to Rockwood, I was in all AP, pre-AP classes in Hazelwood. Rightfully so. I thought that it would just be A-okay for me to switch over into the AP, like just go on the same track so that everything can, continue to be fluent and flow accordingly. Well, at registration, the counselor that I registered with was like, are you sure you want to enroll in AP and pre-AP classes here? Because they're not the same. They're not the same, and you may fall behind, or you may not be ready for that. Our curriculum isn't the same. Mm-hmm.
Let me sit up for this one. Okay. This is a counselor talking to you, right? So her business is education, right? She has access to your educational files, right? So she can see AP on your files, right? She knew that their AP ain't the same as Lafayette or Rockwood's AP. She's telling you the educational system you came from is not the same as the educational system that you're walking into. They know this. They know this. But we want you to believe that America has an even footing for you as it does for every other American citizen. Bullshit. Just like Jane Elliott. I'm take over for a second. I'm gonna give it back to you. Jane Elliott. You know who Jane Elliott is, right? Absolutely beautiful person. And her business is race discrimination or the racial inequalities. And Jane Elliott happens to be a white woman. And she's been doing the brown-eyed, blue-eyed experiment since the 50s, I believe. If not the 50s, the 60s, but I think it's the 50s. And in more recent years, she had a room full of white people. And she said, if there's any white person out there that would change the place with Black people in America, raise your hand. And nobody raised their hand. She said, well, damn it, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe you didn't understand the question. Are there any white people out here that would change places with Black people based on the way they're treated in this country? And nobody raised their hand. She said, what that says is, there is a disparity on how you're treated compared to how minorities are treated in this country. So when she told you the AP courses that you were taking are here, the AP courses you're signing up for are here. They know. They just act like they don't know. Floor is yours.
So to give you more insight on that look, at Hazelwood, my lowest grade was a 97. 97% in all AP, pre-AP honors classes. I didn't take, only regular class I took was gym. My lowest grade was a 97. Granted, I went to Hazelwood Central for about 3 months, so I'm transferring in October, but my lowest grade was a 97. When she said that to me, I said, oh, you must be looking at the wrong transcript because, girl, I'm smart. Like, I got this. Put me in the AP classes. Woo, Jesus Christ. As much as I want to not admit, but she was right. those were different classes. First of all, the catalog for classes, this is Central, this is Lafayette. There were so many options. I thought we had to get the basic reading, writing, arithmetic. That's all we had over there. Like, ooh, a cooking class. Ooh. But at Lafayette, there were so many options. So I'm excited. I'm ready to go. I'm in my AP classes like I was before. First of all, I walked in those classes, nobody looked like me. Absolutely nobody looked like me. No, there was one class where I met one of my very close friends that I'm still friends with now. One AP class where there was a Black person, but the rest of them, nobody looked like me. And their work did not look the same. At Central, in geometry, we was drawing flowers with the protractor. We was making artwork in geometry. And over here, we solving proofs. And thank goodness I had over a 97 in geometry at Central, because your girl over here at Lafayette, dude, I was failing. It was the worst feeling in the world, coming from always having straight A's or maybe one B every now and again to straight D. That was the only class I failed. Well, I almost failed because it balanced itself out, and I think I ended up with like a very, very low B in that class. But I had to fight for it. And that was the moment I realized that it's different worlds out here. From where I was born and raised to now moving out on the outskirts of St. Louis, it is different. And the whole time that I was feeling hi-ho in that counselor's office, like, swerve, you got me messed up, you don't know me, I'm not smart. And then I get into these classes and I'm like, oh, Lord Jesus, I might not be smart. And it wasn't that I was incapable of learning, but it was a whole nother ball game. And that effort that I was putting in at Central, that was not going to cut it. I literally had to remold myself and rewire the way I saw school. And I had to fight through high school at Lafayette. Most classes were pretty easy, but like those AP and those higher level courses that I was taking, I actually had to do work. I actually had to try. I actually had to put in effort. So if we want to wrap this all up and bring it back together, in 1984, he got the 1, the 7, and the 10. And starting from 2012 to 2016, but more specifically this 2012 fall semester of my freshman year of high school, I got flipped upside down. And while I was able to go to this new school with all these resources and I was afforded this opportunity, I wasn't taught to put in the work necessary to keep up with this new curriculum. The playing field was not level at all. I had to rewire my brain. I had to reteach myself because my teachers didn't understand. Well, no, they probably knew. They probably understood, but they were used to, especially the AP teachers, it was rare that they had Black students in their class anyway. But they were so used to teaching at this level. They were so used to their kids coming in already knowing this stuff that they didn't know how to backtrack and say, okay, wait, let me meet you where you are and let me help build you up, because there was no slowing down in those classes. It's either I made the conscious effort to stay after school to speak with these teachers, come before school and put in the effort to catch myself up, or you get lost. And next semester you just won't be in this class. That was the end all be all. And to even give you a deeper insight into this, going to the Rockwood School District, I had teachers telling me. I had a basketball coach who was also a teacher at that school, and she told us that they sent the teachers to workshops to learn to work with minority children. And she boasted about this. We were on the bus going to a basketball game, and she was like, oh yeah, we had this workshop and they taught us all about your culture and blah, 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 blah. And me and the one other Black girl on the basketball team was like, what?
Who taught you my culture? I didn't.
Right.
And it probably wasn't anybody that looked like me.
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. So when you say things like, my family never owned slaves, but still reap the benefits of slavery, make sure that you see the whole picture. It's often said that there's opportunities and resources for all of us, but even thrown in that place where all those resources exist, if I am conditioned to move, think, and behave in an area where there's no resources, so I'm literally making a way out of nothing, how do you think I'm going to perform when I finally get there? It takes more conditioning, more training, but there's nobody to teach me. Yeah, there's teachers here, but they won't even step down to my level to meet me where I am. They're like, oh, well, you got 97s over here, so what's the difference? The curriculum is different. The amount
They
of
know the difference. If the first person you came in contact with was a counselor, she told you right off the top, this is a different race. It's a different race over here. When I say race, I mean race. It's a different, what you're used to. What did he say? Stop what you're doing, because I'm about to ruin the image and the style that you're used to. Everything you knew before, it don't matter because it doesn't exist over here. Now you made the statement. I made the statement where I went from this to this to this. And they were all different levels. All of the children that you went to school with at Lafayette, did they go to Selvage, Crestview, Rockwood South, or Eureka Junior High? Did they all go to those schools?
Most of them, yeah.
Okay, so before they went there, they went to Babbler, Werther. They were in the Rockwood school district from Rooter to Tudor, is what I'm saying. So if previous to Lafayette, Eureka, what's the other one? The Mustangs? Marquette. And Rockwood South.
Yeah, Rockwood Summit or something like that.
Something like that. Prior to those are the underling schools. So those schools are preparing you for this school. I went to Selvage. So by the time I got to Lafayette, I was prepared for the ways of what to expect. But I went from a city school to Selvage. That's where I was indoctrinated into the Rockwood way. And then I went on into high school and I'm good to go. Leslie, on the other hand, went to Werther. From Werther to Selvage to Lafayette. So she was already indoctrinated into the ways before I was. Because when I went to Farragut, Leslie went straight to Werther. So she went straight there. I went from Normandy to Farragut and then went on to military school for a couple years and then went out there. And I went to a military academy, people. I went to a military academy. And when I went out to Selvage, it was like, it's a whole different level. But one thing that didn't happen is all the children that you went to school with at Lafayette, because see, that's your introduction to Rockwood at the highest level. None of them ever went to a Berkeley school. None of them ever went to a Hazelwood school. They never even stepped into a classroom. If they went to those schools, it was simply for athletic competition. You never had to see what these children came up in. My point is, we know what their world is like. We stepped inside of their world. They've never, ever, ever stepped inside of our world. So I understand you. I have to come to your world to go to the mall. I have to come to your world to go to the grocery store. I have to come to your world to go to certain department stores. You never have to come to my world. But you act as though you know what my world is like. There's so many people that live out in Chesterfield that have an opinion on Ferguson, Missouri. Y'all think Ferguson, Missouri is Chirac. Shut the hell up. Because it's nothing like that. Absolutely nothing. You can walk streets of Ferguson, Missouri 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and nothing's going to happen to you. The most famous thing that ever happened in the history of Ferguson, Missouri was the Mike Brown situation. Nothing's going on in Ferguson. You said what?
And we didn't do that.
Exactly. Just like you're seeing now with the protests. You're blaming Black people. Black people ain't doing all that stuff. Black people ain't doing it much at all. And there's video evidence, and would you call it receipts? There's receipts to prove it. But here's my question to you, America. Do you want to get better? Do you want to understand the citizens of this country? Or are you just more comfortable sitting in the bird seat pointing fingers at people? There's a whole bunch of education out there, and it's not just for us. We know. Are you interested in knowing? If you are, shut your mouth and open your ears. We will gladly tell you what's going on. And we have receipts to prove it. Recordings of police brutality didn't start with Rodney King. Way before, when you had fire hoses and German shepherds being sicked on people. We got receipts. We got postcards of Black people being hung on Sundays. Those are scars, side effects, residual side effects of slavery. You may not have owned slaves. I may not have been a slave, but there is an effect from slavery that's never, ever stopped. It exists. And if you have a desire in knowing, shut up. We will tell you. Again, the oppressor cannot define oppression to the oppressed.
I think to wrap this video up and come to a close, just to get you to understand just a little bit more. We talked about 1964 when my grandmother was born in a world where she couldn't vote. We talked about 1984 where my father did 1 year, one fifth grade year, so 1, 7, and 10. And then we talked about in 2012 where my whole world was shooketh just by moving to another school where I realized that we are not the same. I have to understand that we all come from different walks of life and we all get introduced to new concepts at different ages, but that conditioning until you meet us where we at, that conditioning, we have to go through it ourselves to reprogram and rewire, and they find it so often that we are adapting to your world, your lifestyles, to somewhat try to assimilate, but it's never, ever reversed. You never can see it from where we're coming from, or it's never to where you even take the time to get the understanding of why when we finally do get to these resources and these opportunities, sometimes or somehow, some way, we still fail. So if you can't look into the system and you can't see what the root of the problem is that if preparation and opportunity, if they're not meeting, we still are not going to succeed. But if our school systems are not equally supplied or do not have the proper funding, do not have the proper resources, we can work our way up to the top as, as hard and as strong as we possibly can. But when we get there, this was the preparation we had. So now we gotta work 10 times harder to catch up. We're always trying to catch up. And I need y'all to catch up with the concept that we still suffering. We still have injustice, and there's still systematic racism still exists. We just painted the picture over the years, and we can even bring it to 2020 if we had all the time in the world. So if you ain't getting nothing from this video, you still talking and your ears are closed.
I would invite anybody that knows me personally, that does not look like me, if you want to gain a better understanding of Black people, I invite you to have a conversation with me. I will gladly answer any question you have about the plight of Black Americans. But my ask of you, my demand of you is that when you ask me a question, shut up and listen. Don't ask me a question with the intent of responding. Ask me a question with the intent of comprehending. I promise you, you will walk away from that conversation a better person. And there are words like Jim Crow, redlining, gentrification. Those words exist, and they exist for a reason. And I can assure you, Black people made up none of them.
I think just the final little thing that I want to add in there, just speaking of those specific words, when you join that conversation, please don't deflect. Please don't try to run away from it, because you cannot get to a solution without talking about the problem first. And words like Jim Crow, gentrification are identity labelers, and they're placed for a reason, because that's part of the why. We can't fix the what, how, where, and when if we don't understand the why first. Get through that harsh part. You got to be called out first, and the problems have to be identified first in order for us to figure out how to fix this and clean this up.
With that being said, it's about time we wrap this up. But before we wrap this up, this information is free. If you got anything from it, make sure you hit that like button. Also, subscribe. That way you don't have to keep up with us. We'll keep up with you. Please leave comments. That's the only way we can get better, whether it be positive or negative. No big deal. We will definitely be objective to take in any feedback that our public has for us. And most important to me, if you got anything out of our videos, share them. It costs you nothing. And with that being said, Daddy Daughter out.